England, 1815. The year the guns fell silent, but society found new ways to wound. In the glittering halls of Ashcombe Manor, the air was thick with candle smoke and whispers. Beneath chandeliers that trembled with every sigh, Lady Eleanor Ashcombe stood at the edge of her own ruin, draped in silk, but stripped of choice. Her father, the Earl of Ashcombe, had spent years burying the family's debts beneath charm and champagne. Now, his last hope stood trembling in the center of the ballroom, her composure as fragile as the porcelain teacups lined along the tables. The orchestra faltered. A murmur rippled across the crowd. The Duke of Ravensshire had not come. He, the widowed war hero promised to her by contract and desperation, had sent only a note, short, perfunctory, cruel in its civility. "My affairs prevent my attendance. Extend my regards to Lady Eleanor." The note was read aloud by her father's steward, who cleared his throat afterward as though he were announcing the weather. The guests exchanged looks, fans fluttered, pearls clinked against glass. Eleanor held her chin high, every muscle in her body a mask. Her gown, a masterpiece of maroon satin and silver embroidery, shimmered like dignity pretending not to fade. She smiled, softly, painfully, when the Marchioness of Pembroke remarked, "Ah, poor dear, men of honor are often too busy for sentiment." But her voice trembled when she replied, "And yet sentiment is all a woman is permitted to own." A few ladies turned away. Her father's jaw tightened. The scene lingered on her humiliation, the empty space beside her, the pity disguised as politeness. The Duke's absence was more scandalous than any insult. It declared her unworthy of even his shadow. Still, she curtsied to departing guests, thanking them for attending the celebration of what is apparently postponed. That quiet irony, graceful as it was, cost her dearly. When the doors closed, she felt the weight of silence fall over the ballroom like snow. By midnight, only servants remained, snuffing candles and sweeping petals from the marble floor. Eleanor sat alone by the great window, the glass fogging beneath her breath. The moonlight revealed the edge of her letter, creased, rewritten, sealed again. The letter to her father's sister in Bath, claiming an urgent visit for rest and clarity. It was a lie, of course. She had no intention of resting. She planned to flee, to London, to anonymity, to a life unobserved. Her heart thudded with the forbidden thrill of it. For years she had lived as a polished ornament of her father's reputation, spoken of but never truly heard. Marriage to the Duke was meant to restore the family's fortune, not her happiness. But something within her, some ember of dignity, refused to be bartered. The war had ended, yet she was still a captive. Outside, the first color of dawn bled into the horizon. She changed into a traveling cloak, the heavy folds of velvet muffling her movements. In her hand she carried a forged letter of passage signed by her father's steward, an act of rebellion made possible by a servant's quiet sympathy. The halls of the manor seemed to hold their breath as she descended the grand staircase, her footsteps echoing through the silence of privilege asleep. When she reached the garden, the world was hushed and silver. The roses were bare now, only frost clinging to their stems, glistening like lost hope. The gravel crunched beneath her shoes as she crossed the path to the wrought iron gate. Every step was a heartbeat, every heartbeat a question. What waited beyond? Freedom or ruin? She didn't care. Anything but this cage of chandeliers and debts. Her breath clouded before her as she neared the gate. A faint mist rose from the fields beyond, veiling the landscape in ghostly calm. The latch was cold against her glove. She hesitated, her reflection caught faintly in the iron filigree. For a moment she imagined herself vanishing into that fog, her name forgotten, her past untethered. Then came the sound, hooves, steady and deliberate. She froze. The mist thickened, the rhythmic pulse of horse and leather growing nearer until a dark silhouette broke through the dawn. A man dismounted, tall, composed, wrapped in a long velvet cloak that caught the faint light like ink. Smoke curled faintly from the cigar between his fingers. The Duke of Ravensshire. He had been waiting. Her pulse faltered. The gate seemed to hum with tension as he approached, boots crunching over frost. His expression was unreadable, sculpted in restraint. He looked at her not with scorn, but with the quiet knowing of a man who has already decided what must be done. Running away before sunrise, my lady?" His voice was low, the kind that carried command even in calm. "I am told the roads to London are less forgiving than you imagine." She drew herself up, anger flickering through her fear. "You did not come last night. I assumed you preferred absence to obligation." He regarded her for a moment, smoke drifting between them. "Obligation is a word the desperate despise and the proud misunderstand," he said. "I came tonight for neither reason." "Then why are you here?" "To see if you'd truly run." The answer stung, half challenge, half confession. She turned from him, pressing her hand to the cold metal. "You have no right to test me, Your Grace. I am not a soldier under your command." "No," he replied, stepping closer until the faint scent of tobacco and winter air mingled between them. "You are a woman under siege, and I have seen enough sieges to know when a fortress plans its surrender." Her breath caught, anger trembling into something she could not name. "You think this rebellion of mine is surrender?" "I think it is courage," he said softly, and she turned. The fog had thinned. Sunlight brushed the edges of his face, the stern line of his jaw, the tired nobility in his eyes. "But courage without direction is tragedy waiting for a stage." The words hung between them, colder than the morning air. She wanted to despise him, this man who had humiliated her by omission, who now stood as though he owned both her ruin and her rescue. Yet something in his tone, an exhaustion too honest to be manipulative, stilled her. He stepped aside, gesturing toward the open gate. "If you wish to go, I will not stop you. The road is yours, and so are the consequences." Eleanor looked at him then, truly looked, the faint burn mark on his glove, the metal half hidden beneath his cloak, the sadness carried like armor. The man before her was not the villain of gossip, nor the savior of her father's debts. He was something rarer, a man bound by his own ghosts. She said nothing. The fog swirled around them like breath caught between two truths. Slowly, she let go of the gate. The Duke dropped the cigar into the frost, its ember dying with a hiss. "Dawn does not wait, Lady Eleanor," he murmured. "Choose wisely." And with that, he turned his back to her, walking toward his horse. She stood motionless, the mist curling at her feet, torn between flight and something far more dangerous, hope. As he mounted and paused at the edge of the lane, the sun finally breached the horizon, casting a soft gold across the iron gate. For the first time, she realized the bars that held her had never been the metal, but the fear of what freedom demanded. The Duke looked back once, eyes meeting hers through the glow of morning. "London can wait," he said quietly. "But the truth cannot." Then he rode into the mist, leaving her with the dawn, and the unbearable thought that perhaps the man she'd run from was the only one who had been waiting all along. The carriage wheels rolled through the pale winter morning, the landscape unfurling like parchment beneath a hesitant sun. Inside, the silence between Lady Eleanor and the Duke stretched thin, taut as a drawn string. She sat across from him, her hands clasped in her lap, the faint rhythm of her heartbeat matching the creak of the carriage frame. Every turn of the wheel felt like surrender, every breath an accusation. She had not chosen this ride back to Ashcombe. He had offered her safe return, a kindness that felt more like captivity. Yet when he'd extended his gloved hand at the gate, she had taken it, because pride was useless on an empty road. He sat opposite, half-shadowed, his posture as precise as the cut of his coat. The morning light touched the silver embroidery along his waistcoat, making him appear less like a man and more like a portrait brought unwillingly to life. He broke the silence first, his tone measured. "You forged a letter to your aunt in Bath. A convincing hand, though a poor plan. Did you truly think I would not know?" Eleanor met his gaze, her voice cool. "I thought it none of your concern, Your Grace. My movements are not your property." "You forget," he said, the faintest flicker of irritation ghosting his words, "that your father entrusted your safety to me." "My father entrusted my hand," she corrected, "and the debt that came with it. I see no mention of my will among his ledgers." He leaned back, studying her as if her defiance were a cipher he could almost, but not quite read. "You think poorly of me," he said at last. "I think truthfully." Outside, frost glistened on the hedgerows. A crow took flight, its cry echoing through the air like an omen. The Duke watched her for a long moment, then said quietly, "They call me the Iron Duke, but they forget iron rusts when left alone too long." The words hung there, unexpected, too human, too raw. Eleanor looked away, uncertain whether to pity him or herself. "And you imagine that confession earns my forgiveness?" "I did not ask for forgiveness," he replied, his gaze steady. "Only understanding." The road narrowed between walls of trees. The faint smell of wood smoke drifted in through the carriage window. For a moment, neither spoke. When at last the manor came into view, she realized with dread that the place she had tried to escape would soon become her prison again. Ashcombe rose through the mist like something from a dream half-remembered, grandeur rotting beneath decay. As they approached, servants emerged, faces tight with curiosity. Rumor was quicker than any carriage. By now, her flight and capture would be the talk of every drawing-room from Hampshire to Mayfair. The Duke dismounted first, then turned to offer his hand. She hesitated before taking it, aware of every watching eye. Inside, the Earl of Ashcombe awaited them in the drawing-room, his expression caught between relief and humiliation. He greeted the Duke with the unsteady cheer of a man who owed too much to be sincere. "Your Grace, you have saved me from disgrace once again. My daughter's restlessness has caused some talk, I fear, but your discretion is a mercy." Eleanor stood silent beside them, her pulse drumming behind her composed face. The Duke inclined his head politely. "There will be no further talk. I have announced that the engagement remains intact. The matter is closed." Her father exhaled in gratitude. "You are most generous." Eleanor turned sharply to the Duke. "You announced what?" He met her outrage without flinching. "Your reputation was at stake. I would not see you ruined for the mistake of a single morning." "Ruined?" she echoed bitterly. "Do you think me so fragile that gossip can destroy me?" "I think you live in a world that requires no truth to condemn a woman," he said. "If you wish to fight that world, do so after you survive it." The exchange silenced the room. Her father looked away, too ashamed to interfere. When the Duke took his leave, Eleanor followed him to the door. "You will not decide my fate to suit your chivalry," she said, voice trembling. He paused, gloved hand on the doorframe. "Then decide it yourself, my lady. But do it wisely." That night, the house seemed colder than ever. Whispers traveled through the servants' halls. The Duke found her at dawn. She was in his carriage at sunrise. The scandal blossomed with cruel precision. Eleanor sat before her mirror, removing her earrings, her reflection pale against the flicker of the hearth. She thought of his words, "Iron rusts when left alone," and wondered if solitude corroded her too. Near midnight, a carriage stopped outside the gates once more. The butler delivered a small box wrapped in black ribbon. Inside lay a silver locket, delicately engraved with violets. A folded note rested beneath it, written in an unfamiliar hand, his. "This belonged to someone I once respected. Keep it as you would a promise, not as a chain." Eleanor traced the violet pattern with her fingertip. She knew of his late wife, the one society whispered had died of sorrow rather than fever. To receive her token felt both intimate and intrusive, a gesture of trust or pity, she could not tell which. Still, she fastened the chain around her neck. The metal was cold at first, then warm against her skin. The next morning, sunlight crept through the drapes, revealing fresh snow blanketing the gardens. Outside her window, a few servants whispered about letters arriving from London, papers that would formalize the engagement once and for all. Eleanor stood by the glass, her breath fogging its surface, her thoughts caught between defiance and exhaustion. Her father entered quietly, hat in hand. "You must understand, my dear," he began, voice trembling. "The Duke has acted with great honor. He has saved this family from ridicule. We owe him much." She turned from the window, her eyes sharp as glass. "You owe him, father. Not I." He hesitated, then said the one thing that made her falter. "He could have let them destroy you, Eleanor." "He did not." When he left, she unclasped the locket again, staring at it in her palm. The violet engraving shimmered faintly in the light, a relic of another woman's past, now thrust into hers. She thought of the Duke riding through the mist, of his calm defiance, of the strange way his presence unsettled the air around him. In the hall below, the clock struck 10. Its echo seemed to toll for her freedom. She closed her fist around the locket, whispering to herself, "I will not live as another man's salvation." But her reflection betrayed her, a flicker of uncertainty, the faintest longing for something unnamed. Outside, the snow fell thicker, muting the world into silence. Somewhere beyond the white horizon, the Duke of Ravensshire rode toward his estate, unaware that the gift he sent had done what his words could not. It had begun to thaw the frost around her heart. That night, as she lay awake, the house seemed to breathe beside her, restless and alive. The fire crackled, the wind moaned through the chimneys, and she thought of his voice, steady, weary, unguarded. Perhaps understanding him was its own kind of rebellion. When sleep finally came, she dreamed not of London, nor of escape, but of the wrought iron gate at dawn, its bars gilded by light, the Duke's figure blurred by fog. And though she would not admit it, even to herself, she no longer feared the sound of hooves in the mist. She feared silence more. The rain began before dawn, soft as breath against the window-panes, and Eleanor watched from her chair by the fire as the Duke of Ravensshade entered the library. He was still dressed in his riding coat, the edges darkened by the mist, his gloves damp from the rains. His expression, however, was unreadable, neither anger nor triumph, only a quiet steadiness that unsettled her more than fury ever could. For 2 days she had avoided him since that morning at the gate. 2 days since her failed escape, since the world she believed she controlled collapsed into one she no longer understood. He looked at her without preamble. "You were leaving," he said simply, not as accusation but as fact. "I was surviving," she replied, voice trembling though she fought to keep it even. "You would not understand what it means to live in a house built upon a promise that was never yours to make." He took a step closer, his boots silent on the Persian rug. "And yet, you wear my family's ring. You live under this roof. You dine at my table. You think I do not understand what it is to live by promises made by others." Her gaze hardened. "Then why keep me here?" "Because I gave my word," he said. "And because—" he hesitated, the word almost catching. "Because I cannot bear to let you vanish into a world that would break you in a day." Eleanor rose slowly, her silk gown whispering against the floorboards. "You mistake me for fragile, my lord. I have endured worse things than the cold wind beyond your gates." "I do not mistake you," he said quietly. "I remember you." The silence between them thickened. She felt the heat of the fire at her back, the distance between them measured not in feet but in the weight of the past. He had been the man she was meant to marry before war tore the season apart. When news came that he had fallen at Salamanca, her father, impatient for fortune, had bound her to another. Yet the man who returned from Spain bore the title of Duke, and with it the right to reclaim what was once his. "I did not ask for your rescue," she said. He looked at her with that same calm intensity. "You never had to." Her chest tightened with something fierce and unwelcome. "Then what would you have of me now, my lord?" "Gratitude." "No," he said, shaking his head. "Truth." The word struck her like an open hand. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and the steady drum of rain against the windows. Then, slowly, she sat again, her fingers trembling against the armrest. "The truth," she murmured. "Very well. My father sold me, sold my future, to pay his debts. When you were gone, there was no letter, no word. I thought you dead, Henry. What was I to do?" He lowered his gaze. "You were to live," he said softly. "And I was to die. That was the plan." Her breath caught. "Then why didn't you?" His eyes lifted, and in them she saw something raw, grief, guilt, and perhaps the faint outline of something gentler. "Because I could not stop thinking of you. Even when the surgeon said I'd never walk again, even when I lay in a field half-mad from fever, I thought of you standing in the orchard that spring, your hands full of apple blossoms. That memory was stronger than any death wish." She pressed her hand to her lips, her eyes glistening. "You should not have come back for me. It would have been kinder to let the memory fade. He smiled faintly. Kindness was never your gift, Eleanor. That stung, though not unfairly. She had built walls so high she forgot why they stood there, to protect, not to imprison. The firelight flickered between them, painting his face in gold and shadow. For the first time, she noticed how much older he seemed. The boyish arrogance of the young cavalry officer was gone, replaced by a quiet gravity that made her heart ache. "I am not the woman you once knew," she said, almost to herself. "I should hope not," he replied. "The girl I knew was afraid of her own reflection. The woman before me now is not." For a long while they said nothing. The rain softened, and somewhere in the distance a clock began to strike 8. She realized how close he stood, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, smell the faint scent of rain and leather. He reached into his coat and produced a folded letter. "Your father's solicitor sent this," he said. "It seems his estate is now in ruin. You are, by law, under no obligation to remain here. If you wish to leave, the road is yours." Eleanor stared at the letter, then back at him. "And if I stay?" His eyes met hers, unwavering. "Then we start again." Her throat tightened. The offer was simple, but the weight of it felt enormous. Freedom was before her. Forgiveness stood beside her. Both terrified her equally. At last, she rose. The firelight glowed across her face, illuminating the tears she did not bother to hide. "I don't know who I am without anger," she whispered. "Then let us find out," he said. Outside, the rain eased into mist, and a faint dawn light touched the horizon. She looked toward the window, where the estate gardens lay veiled in silver fog. Somewhere, a nightingale began to sing. Eleanor turned back to him. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "at dawn, I will decide." He inclined his head, the faintest smile at the corner of his mouth. "Then I shall wait at the gate." And as she left the room, her footsteps fading into the corridor, a strange calm settled over her. For the first time in years, she felt not trapped, but seen. And though her heart trembled with uncertainty, she knew the storm between them was far from over. The dawn, when it came, would demand her choice.